There's a specific moment in a conflict. Not the beginning, not the peak, a moment somewhere in the middle where something shifts. And you either go somewhere unreachable or something comes out of you that you didn't choose. Sometimes it's coldness. The voice flattens. The words stop coming. You're still in the room, but you're not in the room. Sometimes it's the opposite. Something rises fast, faster than thought, and you say something or a volume comes out that you didn't decide on. And then it's over. And you're left with whatever the aftermath is. The silence, the apology you don't know how to make, the thing they said that you're replaying. And somewhere underneath all of that is a question you keep circling but not quite asking. What was that? Not what happened in the argument, what happened in you? This video is about that question. Not to judge the answer, to actually find it. There's a concept most people in this space have encountered, the window of tolerance. You've probably heard it. You may have a working definition, something like the zone where you can function without shutting down or exploding. That definition is accurate. It's also incomplete in a way that matters, because what it doesn't explain is what is actually happening in the body when you exit the window. And more specifically, why the two exits look and feel so different, and why both of them tend to leave behind the same thing: shame. Here's what shutdown looks like from the inside. The conversation is still happening, words are coming at you, but something has pulled back. Not you exactly, but something in you. And the processing slows, and the words start arriving slightly delayed, and your face has gone somewhere neutral that you didn't tell it to go. Later, your partner will say you checked out. You won't be able to explain that you didn't choose to. And here's what explosion looks like from the inside. There's a moment, very fast, almost no duration, where something rises. It's not quite anger, not yet. It's more like pressure. And then it's past a point, and the pressure becomes words or volume or the thing you said that you didn't mean to say at that precise moment in that precise way. And you watch yourself say it. And you already know, while it's happening, that this is going to cost something. Two responses. Completely different textures. One goes cold, one goes hot. And yet, the same person experiences both. Maybe in different relationships. Maybe in the same relationship, depending on the day. Maybe you cycle between them in a single argument. And you have probably described both of these to yourself at some point as, something is wrong with me. That's the wrong conclusion. And the right conclusion requires understanding what is actually happening, specifically in the seconds before either exit occurs. Let's talk about the mechanism itself. What's actually happening in the body when the window closes? The window of tolerance isn't a metaphor. It's a description of a real physiological state. The state in which your autonomic nervous system is regulated enough to stay present, process information, and respond rather than react. When you're inside it, conflict is possible, not comfortable. Possible. You can track what the other person is saying. You can feel your own feelings without being taken over by them. You can pause before you speak. When you exit the window, something specific happens first. The brain, specifically the structures responsible for threat detection, registers something as dangerous before the thinking part of you has processed a single word. This is not a decision. It is not even a perception in the way you normally think of perception. It is a read. Fast, below language, drawing on everything your nervous system learned about what danger feels like. And once that read fires, once the alarm goes off, the autonomic nervous system moves. In one direction, activation. The sympathetic branch takes over. Heart rate accelerates. Chest tightens. Voice changes pitch. The body is preparing to fight. And if that preparation finds an outlet, words, volume, movement, that's the explosion, not a character flaw. Your nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do when it registers threat. In the other direction, shutdown. The dorsal vagal branch, older, slower, the one that learned even earlier that sometimes the only safe response is to disappear, takes over instead. Heart rate drops. Processing slows. Affect flattens. The body is protecting itself by becoming less available as a target. And if that protection completes, if the system goes all the way, that's the freeze, the checkout, the going somewhere unreachable, also not a character flaw. Also your nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do. Here's what matters next, and this is the part that most explanations of this concept leave out. By the time you notice you've exited the window, you've usually been outside it for several seconds already. The threshold was crossed before the awareness arrived, which means any strategy that depends on catching yourself in the moment, on choosing differently while you're already dysregulated, is asking the thinking brain to override a system that moved before the thinking brain was involved. That's not a failure of willpower. That's the wrong target entirely. The research on autonomic nervous system response and conflict is consistent on this point. The physiological cascade that ends in either shutdown or flooding begins well before conscious awareness tracks it. In people with a history of relational threat, which is what attachment trauma is, at its core, the threshold is lower. The alarm fires earlier, more often, on signals that wouldn't register as threat to a nervous system that hadn't learned to stay ready. Not because something is wrong with those people, because their nervous system did its job. It learned. Now here's where it gets important, and where most people who understand this concept still end up stuck. Here is the thing that almost nobody says clearly enough, and it's the thing that explains why understanding the window of tolerance hasn't changed the experience of exiting it. The window of tolerance cannot be widened by trying harder to stay inside it during an active conflict. Read that again slowly. Once the alarm is fired, once the sympathetic branch has activated, or the dorsal vagal shutdown has begun, the thinking brain is not in charge. Telling yourself to calm down while you're already flooding is like asking someone to read a book while a fire alarm is going off in the room. The instruction is reasonable. The timing is wrong. And this is where so many people who genuinely understand this concept end up disappointed. They know what the window is. They try to stay in it. They exit it anyway. And then the shame arrives with a new layer. I know better than this. The shutdown and the explosion feel like failure because you're measuring them against a standard, I should have been able to stay regulated, that was never reachable from inside a dysregulated nervous system. They're not failure. They're the threshold. And the threshold is the right place to put your attention, just not in the moment it's being crossed. The window widens between conflicts through repeated, embodied experiences that slowly update the nervous system's fundamental assessment. Is this environment safe? Not through insight, not through understanding the concept more completely. Through the body, slowly, learning, by experience, not by information, that safety is available here. Think about a relationship where the window was narrower, where it took almost nothing to dysregulate you. A particular tone, a pause, a word that hit something old. And think about a relationship or a period in a relationship where something was different, where a conflict that would have flooded you completely moved through you differently. You were still uncomfortable, but you stayed trackable. You came back faster. The window didn't widen because you tried harder. It widened because something in the relational environment, consistency, repair, the experience of being in conflict and not losing the relationship, gave the nervous system enough evidence to lower the alarm threshold. That's the mechanism. And that distinction between widening the window during conflict versus between conflicts is the whole thing. It's also where the actual work lives. If what this video is describing feels like something you want to go further with, not just understand, but actually practice, there's a toolkit in the description built specifically for this. 7 somatic exercises calibrated to the relational trigger, not generic stress management, but practices designed to work on the window specifically, in the time between activations, not during the fire, before it. That's where the window actually changes. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. So let's get practical. What does this mean for the next conflict? Not during the peak. That instruction will arrive too late, but before and after. The first thing is learning to notice the early signal. Not the explosion, not the shutdown. The thing that happens before either of those. Several seconds before the threshold is crossed. For some people, it's a tightening across the upper chest. For others, it's a specific quality of stillness that comes over them, a narrowing of focus, a slight withdrawal of presence that happens before the full checkout. For others, it's a heat, or a change in the quality of their breathing, or a particular thought pattern that always arrives at the edge of dysregulation. You probably already know what yours is. You've felt it enough times. The question is whether you've learned to recognize it as the early signal, the moment when there's still a window, rather than just the beginning of something you couldn't control. Learning to recognize the signal doesn't stop the dysregulation. Not at first. but it creates 1 second of witnessing before the system takes over. And that 1 second is where the work eventually lives. The second thing is what happens in the 24 hours after a rupture. This is the piece that gets almost no attention. After a conflict, after the shutdown, or the explosion, or both, the nervous system is still activated, still sorting. What happens in that window either reinforces the narrowing or begins to widen it. Repair, not resolution. Repair, in the hours after a rupture, is one of the most consistently supported predictors of window expansion in relationships with attachment trauma histories. Not the absence of conflict, the presence of return, the experience that the relationship survived the rupture, that closeness came back, is the data point the nervous system needs. And over time, enough of those data points begin to rewrite the alarm threshold. Not quickly, not linearly, but genuinely. The third thing, and this one is for the time between, not during or after, is any practice that repeatedly brings the body into a regulated state in the absence of threat, not because the practice will kick in during a conflict, but because the cumulative effect of the nervous system learning what regulation actually feels like in the body, not as a concept, is the thing that slowly raises the threshold. Breathwork, slow movement, anything that drops the system out of chronic low-grade activation and into something quieter. Not once, not when the conflict is coming, as a practice. As the ongoing conversation your body has with safety, which one showed up more for you? The shutdown or the explosion? And do you know yet what the early signal feels like right before it happens? If you want the somatic practices that specifically address this, the window, the threshold, the space between conflicts where the work actually lives, the nervous system first aid kit is in the description. It's built for exactly what this video opened. Here's what to carry from this. The next time it happens, the exit, whichever direction it goes, the shutdown or the flood, have one sentence ready, not to stop it. You're probably past the stopping point already. Not to judge it, you know now what it is, just to name it. My nervous system crossed a threshold. I'm watching what happens on the other side of it. That's it. That's the whole thing. Not because the sentence will pull you back inside the window, but because the distance between being the exit and watching the exit, even for 2 seconds, even after it's already happened, is where the change eventually lives. You don't have to be regulated to find that distance, you just have to find it once. The window of tolerance is not a standard you failed to meet. It's a description of something real that happened in a nervous system that was shaped by a real environment. The shutdown was intelligent. The explosion was intelligent. They were built in a time when the alarm needed to fire fast, when there wasn't space to track signals, to stay present, to trust that the relationship would survive the rupture. That time is not now. Your nervous system doesn't know that yet. But it is learning. One repair at a time. One early signal noticed. One regulated breath taken in the quiet between conflicts. The threshold shifts slowly. And then one day, not announced, not dramatic, you are in the middle of something that would have floored you before, and you notice that you are still here. Still trackable, still present. Coming back faster than you used to. That is the version of you that's already different, not fixed. Different. And that version is being built right now in the recognizing, in the noticing, in the willingness to understand what your body was doing instead of just condemning it for doing it. That's not a small thing. That is the work.